Okay, I think we should be on right now. So if I'm not wrong, we are starting the webinar right now. Lucas is here with us, and he tells me that we are now broadcasting. Hello, everyone. Just a quick reminder, we are on Zoom and also on YouTube Live. And the purpose of our meeting today, our live, is to discuss the US election, the 2024 election, between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Of course, that we could have several topics, and we chose two topics which are part of the core services of Drummond Advisors here, which is tax and immigration perspectives. So we will have João Gomes, our tax director at Drummond Advisors. We'll have Ricardo Mendes, partner at Prospectiva. We'll introduce them in a bit. The topic is to discuss the immigration and tax proposals of the two candidates, or if you want to be sarcastic, the lack of proposals. We can discuss the lack of proposals as well, but at least we have some ideas of what they want and what they plan. So we'll be talking about these topics today. Okay. In terms of the mechanics of the webinar, we are planned to broadcast for an entire hour. That can be a little longer if needed. We'll answer questions live or answer questions at the end, but don't hold and don't wait until the end to send questions. Send the questions as we go, and then we will pick some questions during the conversation, other questions at the end, okay? And it's intended to be very light, just a chat about it. And it's going to be fun, okay? Guys, let's get started. Most of the people should know or might know Drummond already. You have received our invitations, but again, just a quick reminder and a quick brief on us. About us, we specialize in foreign direct investment to the United States. Our core services are on the tax, legal, and accounting services. We have lawyers and accountants, certified lawyers and accountants in the US. Myself, I am a certified lawyer in the US, and that's why we're talking about US immigration laws and proposals. On the other hand, João is a CPA, certified public accountant, and he will be covering tax proposals. We have offices in Boston, Miami, Orlando, São Paulo, and Belo Horizonte. Now, more than 4 years of experience in the market. Drummond was founded in 2010. More than 10,000 clients, one of which is Prospectiva. We're very proud of that, right, Ricardo? We had a long-standing relationship, and we assisted Prospectiva in launching the US operation, which has been very successful and will continue to be very successful. Now more than 260 employees. Down here, the 4 lines of services: accounting services, legal services, tax services, and consulting services. Okay. Some people are asking here about the language. We had a small change. We will broadcast in English, given the massive registrations we received from other countries, not only Brazil. We have a strong Brazilian background and several Brazilian clients. Most of our clients come from Brazil, but we also have a huge audience watching us from other countries, and we noted that in the registrations. So we'll be conducting in English so that people from other countries can enjoy the conversation as well. Okay. That being said, let's introduce Prospectiva, one of our clients, and I'm very proud to serve Prospectiva for the past, I don't know, probably 7 years already. And Ricardo, please, the floor is yours. Introduce Prospectiva, introduce yourself. You'll be today kind of a host of all of us. So go ahead. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you, Pedro. It's really a pleasure to be here. We've been working together, as Pedro said, for 7 years or more. So it's really a pleasure to be here. Just a few words about Prospectiva before we get started. We are a public affairs firm. We are focus on Latin America, are headquartered in Brazil, but we've been expanding our business to other countries in the last few years. And now we have offices in São Paulo, in Brasilia, in Bogotá, Buenos Aires, a small operation in Montevideo, Mexico City, and also based in Miami. Okay, we have a team of more than 100 people. They're spread across different countries in Latin America. And essentially, what we do is to help our clients to monitor, to stay up to date, and to anticipate movements from policymakers, from regulators, and other agents in the public sphere. We also help our clients to influence specific debates. And in some cases, our drive is very much focused on the development of new businesses when it includes specific regulations or specific policies. We've been in the market for 23 years now. I'm actually one of the managing directors at Prospectiva, and it's really a pleasure to be talking about this important topic today. Okay, so just to get started, I'm going to say a few words about the US elections and why it matters so much. I think the timing of these elections are crucial, not only for the US, but for the entire world and for Latin America, Brazil, and other regions in particular. Okay? So we're having the elections, as you know, will be held on November 5th. Okay, not only we're going to be having presidential elections, but we have congressional elections as well. There are 468 seats are up for election this year. Okay, this could we'll get into this as we move forward, but we should really be paying attention to the congressional elections as much as we are to the presidential race. And why is this race so important? What is happening in the world that makes it so important? I think the first fact is that we are in a very turbulent geopolitical landscape right now. Okay? We have a geopolitical dispute between two major blocks, let's say that. We have the West on one side, and then part of the world on the other side. And this is having a deep impact on how production chains, distribution chains, supply chains, they're all organized. I think we'll get back to this as well, because this is one of the core factors that is shaping the world right now. It used to be a time when considering a location for your business was only based on what the place can offer in terms of advantages, in terms of tax advantages, in terms of markets. And now we have a very important political factor playing a role as well. Okay, the world is really being organized into two poles of spheres, and the supply chains are following that trend. And to our region in Latin America, I think this is important because we see very interesting opportunities for relocating some of these productive investments that were placed in the past in Asia. We'll get back to this in a minute. But still talking about geopolitical landscape, of course, we have the wars taking place in the Middle East. We have a war taking place in Eastern Europe. I think these are very important factors. The two candidates have different views on how to approach these conflicts, and depending on who wins, we may have different outcomes from these conflicts. The second important factor when we talk about U.S. elections is energy transition. Okay, this is a key agenda, especially for the Democrats. It has been the core of the Democratic platform. It has been a core component of Biden's administration, all the industrial policy, the Inflation Reduction Act, everything that was given in terms of incentives for business to be to invest in the United States, for new productions to go to the United States. It has been around this umbrella of an energy transition. The two candidates have two very different views on this topic, and this, depending on who wins, it will also impact on how the coalitions that are formed in the world, and also how the very issue is addressed in the United States. Of course, there will always be California, the largest state in the United States, that will continue with an approach that's more similar to what the Democrats are bringing. But at a federal level, there could be a significant shift in this approach if Donald Trump wins the election. So another important external factor that is shaping U.S. elections is the technology agenda, and more specifically AI. I think this is part of the geopolitical dispute between the United States and Western countries and China. There are significant incentives being provided by different governments trying to attract investments in these areas. At the same time, there's more and more control over the export of goods and technologies that can power AI, that can power new tools in technology. So this is something we should really be watching carefully how it shapes. And again, the two candidates, they do have a more similar approach to this topic, but I think we'll see some significant differences here that can impact all the businesses that are operating in the tech industry. I think the fourth issue or external issue that is shaping these elections is economic uncertainty. We are coming out of a very an incredible cycle of economic growth in the United States. It has this is in spite of the pandemic, in spite of many things that have happened, in spite of all this turbulence, all this geopolitical turbulence. The United States has seen significant economic growth over the last 10, 15 years. And this end of globalization, as I like to call, with businesses no longer being able to locate where the best competitive advantages are offered. I think this does have an inflationary pressure, and it's very uncertain the direction of U.S. inflation. In the short term, I think we do have a direction that it seems to be on a course to reduce, but in the long term, the production costs are likely to increase. Some of it might be mitigated by tax. So this is something we should be watching for, is what kind of impact this will have in the U.S. Economy. And of course, depending on the impact that it has in the U.S. Economy, can have an impact in the entire world. Okay. We should really see how the Fed will be playing with interest rates, and of course this will have a big impact on what the Brazilian central bank and other central banks will also be looking into this agenda. And finally, the last one, I think, is a very relevant and more connected to the topic that we're talking now, is immigration. This is the last external factor. We've seen in the last few years a boom in illegal immigration across the world, not only illegal immigration, but also immigration in general. And this has really become one of the main political challenges for political leaders all across the world. I think people were, even politicians that were fierce supporters of immigration, they're starting to look back into their approaches and see how this can be combined with more security at borders or more controlled way for immigration. this is a key topic. It's a key topic for the United States, a key topic for Latin America. Latin America is at the core of this whole discussion in the United States. Not only, and traditionally, Latin America has been the region that provides or that's most of the immigrants into the United States come from. But this dynamic is changing a lot with conflict zones in Venezuela, with all the political instability in Venezuela. This has created a mass of migrants that basically go from country to country across Latin America. We also see people coming from other regions in the world that can have an easier access into specific countries, into Latin America. Some of them choose to stay in the places they arrive. Others are just there on the way to the United States. So I think whatever happens, whatever policies the candidates follow on immigration, this will likely have a big impact in the countries in the region as well, that not only are supplying waves of immigration, but they're also receiving waves of immigration and being part of these global networks of immigration. So I will end here and I'll hand over to Pedro. Pedro, would be great to hear your view on how the two candidates differ in the approaches, especially to immigration, but also to other topics that I covered here.
Thanks, Ricardo. Great topics, and I wish now that you're talking, I wish we had like 5 hours to discuss all those topics.
It's a lot of time. I have other things here.
They are great, and I wish I can have some time to get back to you on one topic about the end of globalization, that, as you mentioned, and I wrote down nearshoring. I know you guys are operating already in Mexico, and we have clients asking us more and more about operation in Mexico.
Right.
And the last years in the pandemic, they impacted the supply chain around the globe, and that created the nearshoring concept, which Mexico is key. So we have time. I want to go back to that topic.
Sure. Yeah.
But let's talk about immigration. On your point, it is an important topic for both Kamala and Donald Trump. Okay. It is key for this election, as you said. Legal and illegal immigration in the last few years has boomed in every country, like in every rich country. This is not a topic that's important only to the US, but also in Europe as well. But in the US, it's at the core of the discussions. For those who watched the debate last Tuesday, and I watched from the beginning to the end, immigration was all over, especially for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was bringing the immigration topic, even when the topic was not, the question was not that topic. So immigration is very important. However, if we go down to the details of the proposals, neither candidate has a detailed plan, meaning there's no specific agenda that will be covered. There are a lot of saying, there are a tendency. We can talk about some guidance that we expect that they will implement, but no specific agenda. First, before we address specific topics on immigration, we need to remember immigration is a very broad topic. Okay, when we talk about immigration, there's several nuances on that. There's enforcement. There is legal immigration. Will the legal immigration be reformed? Would Donald Trump try to implement a merit-based or even achieve a merit-based system? There's the border, the south border is huge topic, right? Donald Trump, he is strong on that. He keeps talking about seal the border, like build the wall. So the border is a very important topic as well. And what are the differences between the two in general? Okay, I will not talk about the specific topics now, but in general, for Donald Trump, immigration is a more central topic. Okay, is immigration is at the very core of his campaign and of his agenda. And not only is at its core, but it is also a more passionate topic. Okay, you can see that this is treated in a passionate level. Just to give an idea of how core that topic is, out of the 20 so-called core promises that Donald Trump has published, and they are broad core topics, out of those 20 topics, 2 are directly into immigration. And if you check the website, go there, those that are watching us, those are the 2 first ones. And again, talking about how passionate this is, the words he has chosen are passionate words, right? I don't recollect now, but he calls somehow a immigrant invasion, stop the immigrant invasion. You see that's something more passionate and at the core. So, in practical terms, will Donald Trump implement something on immigration to be more harsh? Definitely he will. Okay? We don't know what will be. Several topics need the Congress, need the approval of the Congress. So then we need to figure out how the Congress will end up between Democrats and Republicans. In other words, whether he will be able to implement legislative reforms, but it will be definitely tougher. Enforcement, the same, definitely tougher. Okay. On the other hand, Kamala Harris, what's her approach? It is still an important topic, but not as central as it is for Donald Trump. It is still there on the program. She just released like a week or so ago. There are very few topics, 5 or 6, if I'm not wrong. But it is important, but it doesn't seem to be at the core of the agenda. And it is more the immigration and the solutions being considered, they are more aimed at the root causes of immigration rather than the consequences of immigration. Just to give an example of what I'm saying, when we talk about illegal immigration through the southern border, Donald Trump has the approach to seal the border. Whatever is happening in Central America is not the U.S. problem. Seal the border and protect the U.S. from illegal immigration. On the other hand, the Democrats see, and Kamala Harris see, and has published this, she wants to understand and tackle the root cause of that immigration coming from the South. In other words, discuss what's going on in Central America that's causing this migration. So it's more on a longer-term view and more on a cause approach rather than just the consequences. These are the general topics, and then we can go down to details. For example, to discuss illegal immigration, legal immigration. That's what we do here, like business immigration. We can discuss a bit as well down the road through the life. Okay, I think that's it, Ricardo. And if you can have João joining us or any comments from you, and we can go down to text.
This is perfect, Pedro. Thank you. I want to get back to you with the issue of business immigration in a second, but before that, it would be good to hear from João, his view on the tax agenda from both candidates. They're very different here. I think this is also an agenda that we see completely different views. So, João.
Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. I think it's interesting because I come from a somewhat political background. My grandfather was transferred when the capital in Brazil moved from Rio to Brasilia. He was already working in Congress, not as a politician, but he used to work there. So my dad was 3 years old. When they moved, my aunt, who was the oldest of the 3, also worked in government for 35 years. So I was raised in a way going to Congress when they didn't have classes. It used to be a lot different back in the days. But the reason why I say that background is because it's something very, very tricky especially nowadays. I don't, at least during my life, I haven't seen, not only in Brazil, but especially here in the US that we're talking about this current election. I never seen the party so divided as I have seen in the last few years. So of course, there was always debates, there was always issues that were very different, but my feeling is that they're a lot more polarized. I think this word has been, you guys haven't seen it or heard that word a lot. But going back to taxes, the proposals that you see are very broad, excuse me, actually are not very broad, but they are very, very different. If we start I don't know if you want me to go too much in detail, maybe you can ask questions, but I'm going to do a quick overview and then we can, depending on what the folks that are watching have as questions or even you guys, but I'll give you a quick overview of some, especially the main ones, some that may even seem crazy. So for Trump is trying to have as part of his proposal an elimination of the income tax for individuals. I find that very hard to happen, given that all these policies, all these proposals have to go through a process of voting in the House and Senate to become law. So I don't know how strong that proposal will be in Congress, but it is something that he's considering, is to eliminate the income tax. The question is, how do you increase revenues, right? How do you bring money to the country if you're eliminating income tax, which is your primary source? And his proposal is to increase tariffs. He plans to increase all US imports from 10% to 20%. And we all know how his feelings are regarding China. And for that matter, he plans to introduce a tariff of 60% of imports that are coming from China. So those policies, I don't know how easy it would be for him to really make it happen, but that's part of his proposal. Looking at both sides, and this is historically speaking, tax policy always has more than just tax cuts or increasing taxes. So tax policy looks deeper, kind of what you guys talked about, where how does it affect the country economy and public relations, right? Or country relations. So that's really what tax policy is. Me as a CPA, we're looking a little bit more towards the end result of a particular year or what will increase wealth for a particular client. So that's usually the level that we're looking into. But Trump is, one of his proposals is to decrease the corporate tax rate from 21% to 20%. And then if you produce the goods in the US, to lower to 15%, which is basically today, if your income is average, that's how much you pay in capital gains. So it's an excellent tax rate. It's a lot of savings. On the contrary, Kamala Harris is proposing an increase in corporate income tax to 28%. So that'll be a 7% increase. Just for looking, when you look at just those two, and there are many other proposals that they have, you can sense that a lot of the news, what they say is Trump is trying to favor the wealthy, Kamala Harris is trying to favor the poorer communities, you know, the average American. And to be honest, in a way, I don't disagree, but there is more into it, you know, and that's where tax policy comes about. One other very, very important issue that they're discussing is the estate tax exemption. Right now, it's at about $13.8 million. So we at Drummond, we do a lot of planning and succession planning for wealthy families. And a concern that was happening throughout this year, a lot of planning being done and people shifting assets around, creating trusts, because they fear that the estate tax would go back to about 7 million next year, because that's when the law expires. So Trump is proposing to make the 2017 Tax Jobs and Cuts Act permanent, which will not bring the state tax down. And Kamala Harris has not made any proposal regarding state income tax. I mean state tax exemption. So those are just some of the areas that I've seen that will impact tremendously how we see the taxes. I think from Trump's proposal, we're looking at just expanding what we're seeing. Like I said, the tariff and coming out, eliminating the income tax, I think hard to do, but it's something very, very new that will be very significant. But from Kamala Harris' proposals in tax, I think it's a lot, it will impact more what we are used to seeing, corporate income tax and some other issues. And then, of course, I can share some other proposals that they're considering that will be impactful.
Well, and Ricardo, sorry, can I just jump in to link some ideas of you and João for a question that will be for you, Ricardo. And I know this is the $1 million questions because going to the interest rates, like the future of interest rates, so hard to predict. But anyway, so following what João just said, so the basic idea of Trump will be you lower the internal tax, the income tax, and that will be offset by tariffs on imports, right? That's the general idea. As you mentioned, Ricardo, there is some inflationary tension in the future if that happens. So in theory, imports will be more expensive, then you have some inflation pressure within the country. And that goes directly to the interest rate and how the Fed will react. And then that's my question to you. What do you see the Fed reacting to the inflationary tensions down the road, regardless of Donald Trump or not? Because we know the inflation is already high due to a more structural movement that's not linked just to Donald Trump, but the entire decoupling of China and the US. China is no longer exporting. China is no longer the factory of the world, like supplying cheap products to the entire world. And there is this inflationary tension. So that all being said, the question is, where do you think the interest rate will go? And that's $1 million questions. They're not easy to answer.
Yeah, I think this is a very difficult question to address, Pedro. I think it will really depend on where inflation goes. As you mentioned, on the one hand, we have inflationary pressure from this decoupling of the US and China mainly. I mean, it's bringing production to the United States as Trump intends to promote on a more intensive basis. This will translate into more expensive goods. Okay, this necessarily the cost of inputs in the United States for most goods are more expensive than they are in China. And on the other hand, you have, as I mentioned as well, some of this could potentially be offset by these incredible developments we're having in artificial intelligence. I think AI could really lower the cost of production, the cost of services in some areas. So there we could see a balance between these two here. The thing is, it will be, I think we'll continue to see a lot of uncertainty or where the Fed is going in terms of interest rates, where mortgage rates are going in consequence. So all of this is absolutely going to depend of where things settle, and things are very unsettled right now. We see this is a constant movement. On the one hand, technology, on the other hand, more goods intended to be produced in the United States. So I think rather than answering your question, I think it will, I try to answer just to keep an eye on these factors, because if I had to bet on something as an investor, I would bet on this uncertainty, on this floating of the exchange rate, if we can call it, because there will be times when inflation will come at a very high level, and then the Fed will keep the rates high, and this will likely have an impact on employment. And so I think it will take a lot of skill from the Fed and other central bankers to balance this. Okay, there's climate pressure as well that's important to stress here. We're seeing in Brazil and other countries droughts and other natural disasters that could also have a big inflationary pressure on commodities and other goods. So I don't know. Hard to answer your question, Pedro.
I know,
But
it's hard one.
just before we move on to a specific question that I wanted to ask you, I wanted to comment about Mexico as well, the role that Mexico is playing in this whole game. I think Mexico has been one of the big champions of this decoupling of the US and China. A lot of the productive investments that had previously been placed in China, they're relocating to other locations. Some of these locations are in Asia. Other countries are also benefiting from this, Vietnam and in places like that. Some of the more high technological development of these value chains are going to India. India is a country that's it's booming. The economy is booming, and it's really attracting some of these investments that were previously in China. They're looking at India as an interesting place. And then we have Mexico as a natural location because of the free trade agreement with North American countries, how close Mexico is to the US market. I think it was last year or 2 years ago that the main port of entry of imported goods is no longer a wet port. It's no longer an actual port, but it's rather a border crossing between Mexico and the United States. So it's interesting because if we look at the regions in the US that have seen more industrial growth in the last few years, they're all regions in the southern states. And if we look at Mexico, the regions in Mexico that are booming are the border regions, especially Monterrey and this area. So I think Mexico will continue to be a big champion regardless of who wins the elections. And I've heard some Trump advisors who have a less of have a lower a less controversial approach to some topics, talking about what would a Trump policy for Latin America look like. And they were precisely saying that they would prioritize the Latin American region, especially Mexico, but also Central America. So, of course, the number one priority would be to relocate these investments into the United States. But the secondary priority would be the Latin American markets. They would rather have productions and goods coming from Mexico, Central America, or even regions in Central America than coming from other regions in the world. They do see Latin America as an area of influence of the United States and something they should. A way to address this is with trade. I think with Kamala Harris, this is there as well. As Pedro said, the very approach she has to immigration has to do with tackling the root problems of immigration in the countries. So she does see Latin America as the need to develop the Latin American economies, especially Central American countries in this way. So we could see interesting opportunities for nearshoring as well under Kamala administration. So some opportunities even for Brazil in this game, even though Brazil is far. I think when we look at countries with the capabilities, with the how can I say, the sophistication of the supply chains available, the pool of professional engineers and all of that. There are very few locations left, and Brazil could be benefiting from this movement.
That would be that is just a follow-up question for you. João, if I may, I will continue with Ricardo just on a follow-up question, because that came up already on our Q&A here, which addresses Brazil. This year, we celebrate 2 centuries of diplomatic relationships between Brazil and the US. And the common sense, at least, is that Donald Trump would be a more difficult business partner to other countries than Kamala Harris. I don't think I share that view specifically. I don't think that's black and white. It's more gray than that. It's a gray area. Then my question to you is the impact in Brazil. You spoke very well about Mexico and how Mexico can benefit from this election. What about Brazil? What's your view on the topic?
No, I think, as you mentioned, Pedro, Brazil and the US, I think they're so connected in many ways. The agencies in the government, Anvisa is an independent regulatory agency. It has direct channel with the FDA in the United States. The Department of Commerce has a direct link with the Ministry of Trade and Industry in Brazil, the Ministry of Finance directly with Treasury in the US, so on and so forth. The Fed with central bank. Some of these agencies are independent agencies. So the connection between the 2 countries will remain. Okay, and potentially under a Trump administration, we could even see a boost in this, precisely because Trump will be looking with more suspicion at other regions in the world. So even though he would rather bring production back into the United States, and that's the #1 priority, that is his platform, I think Latin America does have a place there, and Brazil will have a place as well. But I like just to make a quick comment about this as well. It's important to stress that in the past, we've had presidents with completely different political agendas, completely different political views, who got along really well and who contributed to advance trade and investments between the 2 countries. I think the best example was the relationship that Lula had with Bush in his first term, much better than the relationship he had with Obama later. So I don't really see, as you mentioned, Pedro, it's 200 years of diplomatic relations. I think this is well structured. I think. Okay. At the political level, we see some alignments, some comments and things, but deep inside, what really matters in trade and investments, I don't think.
Let me add something here that I get these questions all the time during our class, especially now with the election. People are somehow asking themselves about the future, and should I invest or should I just spend? Should I step in the gas or just wait and see? And the old, should I stay or should I go, right? Should I go forward or not? And my answer is always, you should go. Be optimistic and invest. Administrations, they come and go.
Oh, yeah,
the countries are 2 huge countries. Both are the land of opportunities, right? Invest, be optimistic. The optimistics, they win on the long term.
Yeah, especially when most people were pessimists, that's when you get them. Yeah,
that's when they make it. Pedro, I had a question on I don't know if that either party has discussed this, but I remember that forever since I've moved here, so forever for 30 years, there's always been some type of proposal by usually the Democrats on, for lack of a better term, some type of amnesty for immigrants that are already living in the country. So DACA is something somewhat recent for me, and it helped some of the younger folks. But has anything come about as far as any type of amnesty? I remember in 2000 there was one. Before that, I think in the 80s, but anything that will help, let's say, a guy that came here, has been living 20 years, paying his taxes, has a business, kids are in college, and then he's paying out of the pocket because they don't have any documents, if you will. Anything that you saw on that regard?
Great question, Ron. Great question. You mentioned DACA, and I will touch on that topic, but you first mentioned amnesty and the chance of it. I don't see an amnesty coming up under Kamala Harris. No, not at all. Donald Trump, needless to say, it's not going to happen. And why I see that way? First, this is too hard of a topic for you to discuss an amnesty in the next 4 years. If the Democrats do something, it's not going to be that radical, okay? And remember, talking about DACA now, for those who don't know, DACA is a system created to defer deportation of illegal immigrants that came to the U.S. very young, and they continue in the U.S. until adult age. When Obama pushed DACA, he had a speech where he says, "This is not amnesty." He said that, his own words. So that will resound down the road, and the Democrats will stick to that policy that this is not amnesty. DACA is somehow, a compromise between deporting these people, which for some would be not humane, right? They live in the US since they are like babies. So it's a compromise. And Trump tried to extinguish DACA when he was in his first term. So we need to remember that. So he might try again to end DACA, which was and it is an executive program. Just to touch on a topic, executive programs versus the law on other visas and green cards and etc. Within the immigration options, you have some options that are on the Immigration Nationality Act, which of course is a law and needs to be changed by Congress. But you also have some programs that were created and are maintained by executive actions. One, for example, is the International Entrepreneur Parole Program, which was created under Obama, never implemented by Trump, and then implemented by Biden. That's pending there. That's hanging on an executive action that could be just extinguished easily by Trump if he comes in. So when we judge what can happen, this is an important topic for you to divide. What are the programs, visas, and options that can be amended, changed, or extinguished by the executive branch? And what are those that need Congress approval? Those that need Congress approval, like the main business immigration visas, the entire system, the green cards, those are hard to change, and I don't see Donald Trump being able to change in this term.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, related to this topic, Pedro, one of the points that Trump has mentioned, let me see my notes here on immigration. He wants to, and of course, he talks a lot about ending illegal immigration, but he also talks about creating a more efficient immigration system and perhaps a meritocratic immigration system. I think there is consensus in the United States that the U.S. relies on immigration to continue growing, for the economy to continue expanding. It's one of the reasons why lots of countries are facing challenges to grow, and the U.S. is still growing, is because they have this big pool of immigrants coming, and this offsets the declining population that other countries are seeing. We see this in Europe, we see this in Japan, countries desperately trying to attract especially qualified workers to work in different areas. And the U.S. already has this in place, even with a dysfunctional system. So could we see a point-based immigration system being implemented? This is something that could be done in either
Very good question.
Kamala Harris government or a Trump
Very
administration.
good question. Trump has mentioned in the past his intent to create a so-called merit-based system. For those in the audience, just to have an idea, the most famous or perhaps the most successful merit-based system is the Canadian one. It's a great benchmark to think. It could be implemented. Maybe he can push that through Congress, because you can see some support by the Democrats. Hard to say whether he would be able to implement or not. But talking about the immigration as a whole, Ricardo, it is hard to change the entire structure, because immigration is at the core of the United States since the beginning, right? The U.S. is a nation of immigrants. And we need to think like back in history and understand why the immigration system in the U.S. favors the immigration. The entire America, okay, Central America, North America, and Latin and South America. Well, we are the new world, right? Like Europeans came to America, and the entire system, the constitutions and etc., they were made to welcome immigrants and to populate the countries. So that view and that approach will end up, for example, in a system that favors family immigration in the US. And that's a very hot topic for Donald Trump. Because family immigration with Trump is something that should be avoided, because one comes in and then the other comes in, and the cousin and the brother and the sister and the father, and it's a ever coming process of more and more people. But that's at the core of the formation of the nation back in the days. That was the idea centuries ago. And that idea is at the core of the nation, how the nation was built. Of course, that time changes, right? In the past, the US was trying to bring people in to populate the country. Now it's a rich country. We don't want so many people coming in. Things change. But in a political sense, are we able to change the very core of it, like the very structure, the pillars of the immigration system? It's hard to do, not that easy, okay? And so short answer for you is it could happen. Probably it would be a wise decision to do so, because then it would favor more business immigration rather than just family immigration, and a more comprehensive business immigration system. But it depends on Congress.
Okay. All right, João, I don't know, on the tax front, anything else you should comment? We received lots of questions specifically asking how new tariffs could potentially affect goods exported from Brazil into the US, how these tariffs could impact goods coming from China into the US. There are other tax questions, but some of them very specific that I think might be able to address in specific in other forms, but I think this is one of the questions that we received several.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we talked about, where the view from the party side is usually this, that Republicans favor wealthy Americans and Democrats favor the less fortunate. Before I talk to the tariffs, back to the tariff, but just an example of that is regarding Kamala Harris' proposal on capital gains. She plans on increasing capital gains rate to 28% over a certain threshold. There were talks about her, they call it the billionaire tax, which is capital gains tax of 25% on unrealized gains, which sounds absurd for the common investor. And alongside that, also we have a net investment income tax, which is an additional income tax when you have passive income, such as dividends, capital gains or interest or royalties, even rents for that matter. And she's proposing to increase to 5%. So you can have on top of income tax another 5% for having too much investment, if you will. So to answer your question on the tariffs, again, the debate, the discussion that has raised from Trump's proposal of increasing tariffs and eliminating income tax by those increases is that it may favor the wealthy again, because tens of millions of Americans don't pay income tax. And I'm not saying because they are doing anything fraudulent, it's just they are below the threshold to have an income tax due. So what they're saying is, by you increasing all these tariffs, the wealthier American will be able to afford paying more for the products, but the low income taxpayer who does not pay income tax, now he has an increased cost to live and nothing to subsidize. So that has been some of the critics from the Trump proposal. And as far as Brazil, again, thankfully he's not considering us like China, which will be 60%. That's a huge increase. Of course, his goal there is to motivate people to buy more domestic products. But in general, he's proposing an increase from 10 to 20% tariff on any imports. So that should affect some of the Brazilian imports of any goods being more expensive in the US.
João, can I have a follow-up question on that that's coming from the audience here?
Sure.
Capital gains on an individual level. The question is there anything on the radar for both candidates for any changes on capital gain for real estate investment for foreign investors? And real estate is a special topic for Donald Trump. He made his fortune on real estate investments. You spoke very well about capital gain in general, capital gains in general. Anything specific for real estate, the real estate market?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's in their radar. They try to, even for example, for Kamala Harris on a state tax issue, which is very major. When you look at, tax foundation and different places like that, you don't see any proposals yet, which is surprising a little bit. So when you go into more specific legislation, such as, and just for the folks that are watching, as of now, from what Pedro just asked, if you are a foreign individual and you invest in the US and you have capital gains except real estate, you have zero tax. So you can buy shares from Amazon or from even a private company. If you sell, you don't pay any tax on that gain. Now, there is a specific legislation for many years only for real estate, for capital gains on or transactions in real estate. It's called FIRPTA. They have not touched anything on FIRPTA. No proposals for changes or higher tax for investment, neither regarding the elimination or increase of capital gains tax for foreign investors in the US. So nothing at all has been said in that regard. Trump passed that since 2017, there were some new rules from regarding transactions with foreign companies. So if you're a US person owning a foreign entity, we have guilty tax, for example, that came about. So there are some changes that might happen there. They did some proposals, but nothing significant.
Good. Guys, we are heading to the end. I think we are 5 minutes past the time. We answered most of the questions throughout the live. And I put here on the screen a ebook that Drummond publishes. We prepared and we published on how to do business in the US, how to invest in the US, and the main topics that you should consider when investing to the US. And I would like to end the webinar with this idea and with this message showing how to invest in the US and advocating for the idea of investing in the US. Regardless of the candidates, the US will remain strong, the most dynamic economy in the world, is still open for business. This was is an idea that Democrats and Republicans always have. The U.S. is open for business, and huge opportunities wait for foreign investors in America. So keep that in mind. Presidents and administrations, they come and go. As Ricardo said, for example, Brazil and the U.S. have 2 centuries of diplomatic relations. They will remain. So the opportunities are huge. Don't stop investing. Just go ahead. It's going to be interesting times, right? As always, every 4 years in any country, interesting times.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Lots of opportunities.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Let me share the business contacts of myself. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. You can send me email. As I mentioned here, part of our core business is immigration. We spoke about immigration, so if you have follow-up questions on immigration, we can help. Send me a message. Here is João, his contact information, the email, and his LinkedIn. Send him questions and messages about tax. João and the Drummond tax team are here to help. We're happy to help and serve you guys. Here the business information, the contact information for Ricardo. Also very happy to help. The LinkedIn, questions about political and how you accompany the changes in legislation, etc. You can direct to Ricardo. If you're planning to invest, if you are watching new regulations, if you need to anticipate movements on the political arena, talk to Ricardo, talk to Prospectiva. They are great, and they are doing this for the past 23 years, you said, Ricardo?
23 years. Yeah.
Wow. Well, congrats. So, folks, your last words. Thank you very much for being here. Ricardo, especially you. Thank you for accepting our invitation. It's been a pleasure and an honor to serve you throughout these years, and very, very nice to have you here with us today.
Yeah, happy to do this with you guys. Looking forward to do it again some other time, Pedro.
Thank you, João. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
guys. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Pleasure. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you very much.